Weight wasn't the problem. Rhythm was. Mara Ellison saw it before the driver understood he had stopped in the worst place on the bridge. The fuel truck had died with its rear wheels riding one pontoon down, and its nose still angled toward the convoy side, half committed, half refusing. The floating deck did not sink. It pulled crooked under her boots, a slow sideways lie that ran through the splates and up into her knees. Behind her, the convoy side stacked in fumes and brake lights. Ahead, the terminal side held workers still trying to get out. The weak side was the pull in the water under her left boot, and the equipment apron sat beyond the far float, too distant to help yet and close enough to matter later. In the cab, behind glass filmed with heat and grit, a man pressed one hand to the window. His mouth moved once. No sound reached her over the engine noise and the hard slap of water under the decking. His eyes were wide enough to make distance feel indecent. Mako strained at the lead, then checked back hard, ears cutting through the glare. He did not point. He circled, nose high, then low, then away from the fuel vapor spilling thin and sweet across the salt air. The heat made every smell bigger and less trustworthy. Mara lifted one hand and chopped it flat. Hold the lane. Kill the forward push. Nobody rolls. The order hit the first two drivers late, then hard, and their brake lights bled red through the heat. The first thing scared people wanted was motion. Motion felt like rescue. On a bridge that had begun to twist, motion was just a prettier word for panic. Mara felt the deck come back under her left boot, then lag under the right. Not much, not enough for an officer in a truck behind her to see. Enough. The rhythm broke in pieces. A brake tap too hard, a wheel nudging forward, a driver behind it answering half a second late. Those half seconds stacked until the pontoon yawed against the water like a tired shoulder. The waterline along the near pontoon should have slapped clean and even. Instead, it tugged in a diagonal pulse, hidden under a skin of fuel that shone too calm in the sun. She hated that shine. Calm surfaces lied, and this one looked dressed for church. "It isn't sinking," she said, loud enough for Briggs behind her and the first two drivers to hear. "It's being pulled crooked." Then she caught herself. The rear tie-down on the truck bed was not the main offender. The forward axle had kissed the lane guide and bounced off half an inch. Small difference. Ugly difference. She adjusted her order with 2 fingers, not a speech. "Back 6 inches, no more, slow as guilt." Briggs repeated it too fast, voice young and dry at the edges, but he got the hand signal right. That counted today. The driver in the cab slapped the window again. A tremor ran backward through the convoy, metal passing fear from one vehicle to the next. Horns started. A woman somewhere behind the first cargo flatbed screamed for someone to move. Mara did not look back. Faces made people hurry. Structure told them how many seconds hurry would steal. Mako pulled toward the truck, then veered from the spill, nails ticking on wet plate. His lead tightened, loosened, tightened again. Not a clean alert, not nothing either. Fuel. Salt. Hot rubber. Men sweating fear through cotton and armor. Too many smells braided into one dirty rope. Mara shortened the lead without thinking, then eased it out again, a small correction she felt more than admitted. If she held him too close, she would turn uncertainty into obedience and call it proof. She had done uglier versions of that in worse places, and the memory sat behind her teeth without becoming a thought. The truck coughed once. Its engine tried to catch, failed, and the deck yawed another inch toward the water. The man in the cab stopped pounding and simply stared at her. The shot came before anyone found the shooter. It spun off the bridge edge with a flat metallic crack and punched the water beyond the pontoon. It missed the windshield and the driver, but the rail tremor said it had hit something that mattered. Mara's head turned only far enough to mark the impact, then came back to the bridge. The man in the cab flinched low. Mako barked once, sharp and angry, then checked her face as if asking which danger mattered. Not them first, Mara said, though she did not know yet who them was. The bridge first. She pushed two drivers back with her hand and dragged the lane into silence, one order at a time. The truck shifted, not free, not safe, but no longer dragging the whole span with it. Somewhere behind her, someone prayed in a voice that sounded irritated by God's timing. For 3 breaths the pontoon rose. Then it stopped short of flat. Mara watched the waterline refuse to come home. That was the part that stayed cold in her chest. Behind her, the convoy had lost its rhythm, and once a convoy learned fear, it taught everyone behind it. It was only beginning to talk. The delay reached the convoy faster than the bullet had. It moved bumper to bumper, door to door, a bad current made out of men leaning from windows, and drivers looking for permission from anyone except the bridge. The first cargo flatbed drifted out of line by less than a tire width, enough to make the floating deck answer under Mara's feet. A second truck nosed forward to close the gap. Someone behind it braked too hard. Metal groaned, engines coughed, and the deck lagged under the uneven pressure. Cho came over the radio, clipped and clean, the way officers sounded when fear had polished them. Terminal side still had workers exposed. Convoy side was stacking up. Every minute made both problems worse. Mara could hear the truth in it and still hate the pressure. Safe is a civilian word. Move. She snapped at a driver who had frozen with both hands locked on the wheel. Then she pointed Briggs toward the lane guide. Keep them single, no hero gaps. He swallowed once and went, boots slipping on the wet plate before he caught himself. Fear had not frozen him yet. That mattered. He had seen enough to move anyway. Briggs moved before his fear could make a better argument. He planted himself where the lead truck could see him, palms low, shoulders too stiff, doing the job anyway. Good. Not graceful, but good. The bridge stopped, shuddering for half a breath. Hadi al-Karim appeared at the side of the fuel truck with a grease-dark sleeve pressed over his mouth. Mara knew his name from the terminal roster, but rosters were paper comfort, nearly useless out here. Not cargo, he said, anger tucked so tight it sounded like manners. He pointed at the flatbed behind the stalled tanker. That crate shifted when they stopped. Nabil was riding the step. He is not in the cab. Mara looked once at the cargo, once at the fuel sheen, once at Mako. The dog had already turned toward the gap under the flatbed, but the smell picture was trash. Fuel vapor rolled under the chassis. Hot rubber drowned sweat. Salt water slapped up through seams in the decking. Hattie's hand stayed pointed, shaking only at the wrist. He had given her a name, which was worse than a number, and harder to cut away. Search, Mara said, low, giving Mako the job and not the answer. He went forward with his head cutting side to side, then checked back, frustrated by the dirty air. Mara could feel him sorting a contaminated scent picture, trying to separate a living person from fuel, rubber, canvas, and bridge heat. He found a line, lost it, found it again near the wheel well, where canvas had torn and cargo straps had bitten into the load. The lead trembled through her glove. She let him work, then stopped him short of crawling under the truck. No clean point. Just pressure building in the dog's body and a change in the way he avoided the fuel puddle. Hattie dropped to one knee and shouted a name under the flatbed. No answer. He shouted again, this time in a voice that carried something sharper than fear. A muffled knock came back from behind the shifted crate. Briggs heard it, too. He did not cheer. He only shoved a loose strap aside and said, too fast, alive, can't see legs, cargo pinched him. Mara hated how useful the report was. Useful meant the bridge would have to wait. The pontoon dipped before she spoke, already counting the delay. Mara made the choice and felt the cost settle under her boots at once. Movements stopped. Drivers cursed. Cho asked for status, then did not ask again when Mara cut her off with 3 words. Trapped man. Extracting. The rescue was ugly and tight and slow, all elbows, hot metal, cargo scrape, and men trying not to make the fuel truck rock. Briggs got his shoulder under a strap, braced, realized he would move the whole load. If he panicked, and shifted his weight back with a grim little nod. Hattie kept saying Nabil's name, not loudly, not softly, just enough to hold the man in the world. While they worked him free inch by inch, each repetition cutting through engine noise like a hand on the shoulder. Mako backed out when Mara signaled, circling once with irritation and heat working at his ribs. Nabil came out folded around pain, sucking air as if it had insulted him. Hattie caught his face in both hands and said his name twice, not tenderly, almost angrily, like anger could keep a man anchored. Briggs held the strap until his arms shook, then eased it down by inches so the cargo did not answer with another swing. A life saved. Not free. The pontoon under the tanker dipped again, then came back slower than before. The delay had bought one man air and sold the bridge another piece of its margin. Across the waterline, near the equipment side, a figure in wet, diesel-streaked gear was watching the bridge instead of the people. Mara saw that first, which told her the news would be bad. The next trouble was already standing on the far side. The man on the far side did not wave. That was the first thing Mara trusted about him. People with good news waved. People with bad news watched water. Raphael Calder stood near the equipment package with his boots sunk in wet grit, and his sleeves dark to the elbows, diesel shining on one knee like old blood. He had a radio clipped high, a coil of line over one shoulder, and the look of a man already measuring the apology he did not plan to give. The bridge trembled again under the stalled tanker. Nabil had been dragged clear, but the rescue had left weight sitting where weight should have been moving. Rafe looked past Nabil, past Hattie, past the convoy, straight at the water slipping under the near pontoon. Mara hated that too. It meant he was seeing the same wrong thing from the other side. The lag she had felt in her boots and hoped would stay small. Mako saw him next. The dog lifted his head, caught diesel and salt and the sour edge of human stress, then gave a short pull toward Rafe before checking back to Mara. Another dirty piece of air to sort through. Rafe came down the equipment side edgeway without hurrying, which was either discipline or bad knees. Mara had known him long enough to suspect both. The first round had made the drivers louder and less useful. The second had not come yet, which somehow made the air worse. He stopped where the deck plates met the equipment apron and put one hand flat on a rail that was still shaking. He did not say hello. He bent, watched the waterline, then tapped 2 fingers against the rail in time with the bridge's lag. Before he explained anything, he shoved a loose coil clear of the edge with his boot and signaled 2 equipment hands back from the rail. The motion was small, practical, and irritatingly correct. One man had been standing where the float would bite if the side pull deepened. Rafe saw that from the water side. Mara had not. "Your near side is returning slow," he said. "Far side's answering late." "I noticed." "You noticed from up there." He finally looked at her, and the old humor arrived tired, limping behind his eyes. Still making friends with charm and implied violence. Mara kept her face on the bridge. "You picked a poor day to miss me." "I missed the dog more." Mako gave him a sideways stare and a breath through his teeth, then turned his nose away from the diesel. Mara did not let that become a story. Dogs smelled bodies. People invented sins. Rafe pointed at the water, not the truck. That mattered. The current's not hitting you straight. It's catching under the float, then walking sideways before it lets go. Speak like you want to live. Fine. The bridge is being bullied from underneath. Briggs, 10 yards back, looked like he wanted to write that down and knew better. Rafe crouched and put his fingertips near the wet line on the apron. Not touching anything that would get a man killed, just reading the beat of the water against metal. A pull, a pause, a pull again. Mara could see his shoulders tighten before he stood. Cho's voice cracked over the radio, asking for a clean crossing estimate. Mara did not have one. Clean had packed its bags 5 minutes ago. How bad? She asked. Rafe's mouth did the thing it did before a joke, then failed to become one. For the record, this is not in the bridge manual. Good. Manuals are flammable. The line bought them 1 thin second of being people. Then the bridge dipped again, and the second was gone. Rafe slid his hand along the rail to the coupling housing, stopped short of naming it, and looked away too quickly. Mara saw the avoidance. He had been around the equipment package before the convoy started. He had touched this problem before it became hers, or close enough to leave fingerprints on it. What did you change? She asked. Rafe did not answer fast enough. That was an answer with its boots still on. Setup was rushed, he said. We made the faster configuration work. It works fine under straight load. And under this. Under this, it argues. Mara looked at the stalled tanker, at Nabil breathing in the open air, at Hattie counting men with his eyes, at the fuel sheen pretending the water was polite. Her private rule pressed against her ribs. Nobody visible on the wrong side got abandoned while steel still offered a maybe. Rafe knew that rule. Worse, he knew why she had made it. You telling me to cut it? I'm telling you, the bridge is starting to spend money it doesn't have. Across the approach, another impact cracked against vehicle metal, low and deliberate, and the flatbed behind the tanker jumped on its brakes. Metal answered with a shiver that ran through the deck and changed the waterline by a finger's width. Rafe saw it. Mara saw him see it. Somewhere behind her, Cho demanded to know why a vehicle had stopped again. The bad news had just learned to shoot at the bridge itself. The next deliberate impact took a mirror off the lead flatbed and turned it into bright trash across the deck. The driver ducked so hard his forehead hit the wheel. Mara did not blame him. She blamed the way his foot slipped off the brake and sent the truck nudging forward with the tanker still crooked ahead of him. The bridge felt that little nudge through the plate seam and into the rail. Rafe swore under his breath, not at the driver, not at Mara, but at the water. That was becoming a habit she disliked. Briggs, Mara called. Lock that lane with your body, not your ego. The young engineer moved, pale and quick, planting himself where the driver had to see a human shape instead of an opening. Cho's radio voice came in hard, asking if they were taking casualties. Taking stupidity, Mara said, and hated the joke as soon as it left her mouth. Then another round hit low on the bridge edge, skipping metal into the water. The rail jumped under her hand. Mako snapped toward the weak side, lid tight, body angled at something Mara could not yet see. A direction, dirty and partial. She gave him 2 inches of lead and watched what it cost. Movement came near the approach, fast and low behind a line of vehicle hulls and heat glare. Mara saw pieces, not a clean picture, a shoulder crossing a gap. A flash of dark cloth, a hand pulling back from the bridge rail, then nothing. The impacts kept coming wrong. Tire, rim. Lane guide. Bridge, edge. Water beyond the pontoon. A person would have been easier to understand. Uglier but cleaner. This was messier. This was someone shaping the bridge from the outside. One driver tried to reverse from fear and hit the vehicle behind him with a sound like a dropped gate. The collision barely counted as a crash, but the deck counted it. The rear float dipped and the lane guide scraped, adding a thin metal scream to the engine noise. Two men on the convoy side grabbed the flatbed rail at once, then let go when the hot metal bit through their gloves. Their half-help moved the truck a finger width, and that finger width reached Mara through the deck. Mako lunged once when Mara cued him toward the open flank. He did not charge blind. He cut sideways, barking into the gap, forcing the movement to break off and buy the team a breath. The dog's paws slipped on salt-wet metal, recovered, then he checked back with heat bright in his eyes. Seconds. That was all he had bought. Seconds were real currency now. Rafe shouted from the equipment side that the far float had answered late again, his voice clipped flat by distance and diesel noise. Mara barely heard him over the engines and the thin, miserable scream of a tire losing air somewhere behind her. The flatbed sagged toward the wrong side when the tire gave up. Enough. The load shifted with a scrape that made every driver behind it flinch. Briggs saw the danger first and slapped the driver's door with both palms, yelling him still before panic turned the wheel. Good kid. Too loud, too scared, but he saw it before fear finished making him useless. Mara crossed to the lane guide, boots sliding on fuel-slick spray, and put her bad hand out before remembering it was not bad yet. The bridge chose that moment to punish optimism. Her glove caught hot metal. Her fingers jammed against the rail, and pain shot up through her wrist, sharp enough to clean the world. She did not pull back. Pulling back would have told everyone the bridge had hurt her. Instead, she used her forearm, shoved the guide clear of the flatbed's new angle, and felt something in her grip turn unreliable. The weak side movement pressed again, closer this time, using the stalled vehicles as cover and the drivers as noise. Hattie dragged Nabil back with one arm and shouted for the nearest man to keep low. Mako barked again, shorter this time, frustration more than threat. The movement withdrew, but only because it had learned something. Mara had too. They were not missing. They were steering her choices. "Stop chasing bodies," she said, though nobody had started. It was for herself as much as the team. Watch what they hit. Rafe looked up. So did Briggs. The next impact punched the water beside the pontoon and threw a fan of bright spray over the fuel sheen. For one clean second, the water looked flat, almost gentle, dressed in rainbow light and lies. Then the deck rolled under it, slow and sideways, and the calm disappeared as if it had never been there. Mara's wrist throbbed inside the glove, each pulse small and private and badly timed. The convoy had lost another minute. Nabil was alive. The tanker was still not moving. Terminal side still had people Hattie could name, which made them harder to abandon and easier to kill by delay. Cho asked for a decision, then forced herself silent long enough to receive one. Mara watched the water settle into a false shine. She could feel Rafe waiting across the line with his bad news half-spoken. She could feel Mako's lead trembling, not certain, not wrong. The bridge itself had become the target, and the enemy had found the language it understood better than men did. The water went calm in the wrong way. That was what fooled her, which made it worse. Mara had seen panic water, wind water, current water, water kicked white under a bad crossing. This was dressed flat by fuel, a bright skin stretched over motion it did not want to confess. The bridge still pulled sideways, but softer now, almost polite if a person trusted eyes more than boots. Rafe did not like it. He stood on the equipment side apron with one hand on the rail, looking under the spans instead of at the convoy. Mako did not like it either. His lead trembled, then went loose, then tightened toward the weak side. Before he checked back at Mara with heat in his mouth and confusion in his eyes. The cue was dirty, incomplete, wrapped in salt and fuel and noise. Cho came over the radio with the kind of calm that meant she was counting people she could not see. Terminal side workers were still exposed. Convoy side was choking. The tanker had to move enough to clear the lane, or the route would die by inches. Mara looked at the false shine, at the deck angle, at the man breathing beside Hattie, and felt the old rule close around her ribs. Not while people were still wrong side. "Give me the far float," Mara said. Rafe answered too fast. "Late, still late." "How late?" "Late enough that I hate the question." That was not a number. It was more honest than one. Briggs hovered at the lane guide with one hand tucked close after the last jolt, pretending he was ready for anything. He was not. None of them were. Mara shifted her glove on her aching wrist and watched the waterline again. The fuel sheen had smoothed the diagonal pull. It made the current look like a lie told by a careful man. A clean answer would have been a luxury, and luxury had drowned early. Her read said the bridge could take one controlled movement if the tanker rolled straight, and the flatbed held still. Her dogs, the air was dirty. Rafe's silence said the bridge was keeping a secret. Cho's status said people were still waiting with nowhere to go. Mara trusted the structure, partly because she knew it, and partly because the alternative tasted like leaving someone behind. Tanker moves 6, flatbed holds. Nobody corrects after the roll starts. She heard herself say it and disliked how sure she sounded. The tanker coughed forward. 6 inches became 4, then 5, then enough to change the deck's mind. For one breath, it worked. The pontoon rose under the rear wheels, and the lane straightened by a fraction. Drivers saw hope and leaned into it, because hope had always been a terrible traffic controller. The flatbed behind the tanker shivered. Its damaged tire folded under the rim. The bridge rolled away from the false calm, hard and sudden. Mako lunged sideways, not at a man, not at a target, but at the shift itself, too late to matter. A water can broke loose under the flatbed and burst against the deck. Clean water mixing with fuel so fast, the surface turned slicker than before. Briggs grabbed for the guide with his good hand and missed clean. His shoulder hit the truck bed. The cargo that had trapped Nabil swung back with a dull, stupid weight and pinned Briggs against the lane frame. The strap snapped tight across his chest and dragged one boot off the deck. His cry cut through the engine noise and died fast, which was worse. Mara went down on one knee as the deck kicked under her. Her bad wrist struck metal again. Pain flashed white. For half a second, her hand would not close, and the shame of that was almost as sharp as the pain. Across the waterline, Rafe moved toward the coupling housing and stopped where exposure began. He had recognized the pattern now. So had she, just late enough to pay for it. It was not sabotage. That was the ugly mercy. The faster setup change had done what field changes always promised to do: save minutes when minutes were holy. Under straight load, it had held. Under lateral pull, current, panic, and enemy pressure, it had become a hinge in the wrong argument. Rafe had not built a crime. He had trusted a trade-off too long. Briggs was still pinned, his free hand clenched around the strap, because letting go would let the cargo swing again. Hattie had Nabil half behind the flatbed tire, shielding him with his own back. Mako's breath came hot and rough beside Mara, his body still pointed at the wrong movement, but offering no clean answer. Mara looked at the new angle of the bridge. The fuel-slick water pretending innocence, the impacts that had struck metal, water, tires, lane guides. A hand closing around her choices. If she cut early, terminal-side workers stayed trapped for the assault force. If she held too long, the bridge would spend her team first and the civilians after. The bridge was not just the road out. It was the weapon pointed at the decision-maker. "They want the cut," Rafe said, voice thin over the noise. Mara did not answer. Cho asked for the decision again. Mara looked at the water, and, for the first time that morning, did not trust herself to read it alone. The old version of Mara would have tried to fix the bridge before she fixed the room around it. That was the stupid part of being good at something. You started to believe the answer lived where your eyes were strongest. Now Briggs was pinned against the lane frame. Nabil was coughing beside Hattie. Mako's breath had gone rough in the heat, and the bridge held its new crooked angle like a grudge. A probing impact hit water beyond the pontoon and threw spray across the false shine. Another snapped against vehicle metal on the approach. The enemy was checking what the last mistake had cost. Mara kept one knee on the deck and forced her bad hand open inside the glove. It obeyed late. She hated late things. "Rafe," she said into the radio. "Water first. No speeches." His answer came with wind and equipment noise behind it. Current still walking sideways. Far float late. Underbridge pull worse after the shift. She watched the far edge tremble while he spoke and saw the truth arrive in the metal, not just the radio. Cho, Convoy. Cho gave her numbers without drama. 2 vehicles jammed forward. 3 waiting in line, terminal side workers still exposed, movement window shrinking. Behind Mara, a driver heard Cho's tone and stopped arguing. His truck stopped creeping, and the deck quit ticking under that axle for one blessed second. Valid pressure. No villain required. Life was rude enough without inventing one. Hattie, Mara called. Names, not trucks. He understood before she finished, because Hattie seemed to hate categories on principle. Nabil was clear but weak. 2 drivers still wrong side. 4 maintenance workers near the pump house. 1 old man who would not climb unless Layla moved him herself. Mara had heard Layla's name twice on the radio and had not put a face to it yet. That did not make her less real. A woman's voice cut in, sharp and breathless, speaking from terminal side with machinery whining behind her. Layla had the pump house group moving low along the marked wall. And Mara saw 3 small figures shift through heat shimmer as if the radio had become bodies. She needed 30 seconds before the next vehicle committed. Maybe 40 if the old man kept arguing with gravity. "Give him a reason," Mara said. "Not a lecture." "I gave him 3, Leela snapped. "He disliked all of them." "Good." Angry people moved better than polite corpses. Mara looked at Mako. The dog stood with his weight uneven for one blink, then squared up when he felt her looking. His tongue had gone wide. One paw lifted and set down again on the hot, wet plate. Not out. Not full asset either. Another input with teeth and limits. Briggs made a sound he tried to turn into a laugh. It came out thin. "Still here," he said, because young soldiers thought that was useful news. Today it was. His shoulder was pinned, but he could breathe. And his free hand had kept hold of the strap that stopped the cargo from swinging again. Mara did not praise him. Praise took time and sometimes made scared people soft. "Keep that hand. Lose the commentary." He nodded, face gray with pain and heat. Rafe asked if she could pull the flatbed back. Mara looked at the bridge, the water, Mako, Briggs, then the tanker. The answer was maybe, which meant no until someone else confirmed it. That was the new method, ugly and slower, but slower had just become cheaper than wrong. "Nobody reads a bridge alone," she said, "not as wisdom, not for morale, just a rule with blood on it. Rafe gives water, Cho gives timing, Hadi and Layla give people, I give the call, Mako gives me what he can, not what I want." Nobody argued. That alone told her how bad it was. Another impact struck the approach rail and made every driver flinch in the same direction. The bridge did not like that either. The loop worked, which was annoying. since it proved she should have built it earlier. Rafe found a narrow water window that would not last. Cho cleared one stalled driver from the stack by voice alone, cold as a knife and twice as useful. Hattie named the 2 workers who could move, and the one who would slow them. Layla turned that into bodies changing place on the terminal side, not a promise, an action Mara could use. Mako leaned against her leg once, hot and restless, then pulled his weight off again, as if embarrassed by need. His status mattered because he mattered, and because he was one less clean tool. Mara made the next call smaller than pride wanted. No full roll. No heroic push. Unpin Briggs first. Straighten the flatbed enough to stop the bridge spending itself. Then move only when Rafe called the water. The plan required Rafe closer to the exposed edge and Briggs staying useful while hurt. It required Layla to move workers under pressure and Cho to hold angry drivers in place. Better read, worse margin. That was adulthood in uniform. Apparently. Across the weak side, movement gathered again behind the vehicles, lower and closer than before. The next push was coming. This time, Mara would not meet it with only her own eyes. The push came low and ugly, not like a charge in anyone's recruiting film. It came through heat glare and vehicle shadow, through the weak side where the bridge edge already sounded tired. Mara saw the first shape break from behind the hull of a stalled utility truck, then another behind him. Both moving with the patience of people who understood. Bridge had started doing some of their work. An impact snapped against the lane frame near Briggs' pinned shoulder. He flinched, which made the cargo strap jump, which made the flatbed shift a fraction. Everything was connected now. Every inch had relatives. Mako felt the movement before Mara gave him anything. His lead tightened, chest low, breath rough from heat and old fuel stink. He wanted the gap. He wanted the job. Want was not enough. Mara looked once at his paws on the hot wet plate, once at the weak side movement, once at Briggs, and hated the math. Her wrist had swollen against the glove until the seams bit skin. If she sent the dog, she bought time. If she kept him back, the weak side opened wider. Mako, she said, short and clean. Flank. The cue was not permission to become a miracle. It was a request for seconds, and the dog took it like seconds were meat. Mako cut across the deck on a shallow angle, fast enough to make the nearest driver shout, and slow enough that Mara could still read him. His paws found the dry patches first, then lost them where salt water and fuel residue made the metal shine. He barked into the weak side gap, body squared toward the movement, not chasing, not blindly, taking the fight somewhere she could not control. Good dog. Smart dog. Tired dog. The 2 shapes broke apart behind the truck hull, one falling back. One stopping long enough for Briggs and Hattie to drag the cargo strap free another handspan. That was the whole victory. One handspan. The deck groaned under the shifting cargo. Rafe shouted that the water window was narrowing. Cho held the convoy stack with radio ice and whatever authority she had left. Layla's voice cut through once, breathless, telling Hattie the pumphouse group had moved. And the old man was finally walking because someone had threatened to carry him badly. Mara almost smiled. Almost. Then Mako slipped. Not far. Not dramatic. One paw skated sideways on hot, wet plate, and his whole body corrected with a snap that cost him more than it showed. The weak side shape noticed. Mara saw the hesitation turn into interest. Mara felt the correction through the lead. The tremor was small and wrong, a private stutter in the dog's stride. Mako kept facing the weak side, still willing, still offended by the idea of limits. His breath had changed. Wider mouth. Faster ribs. Heat working under the vest and through the pads. He lifted the same paw he had set down badly earlier, then put it back like pride had ordered him to. Mara's wrist throbbed where the glove had stiffened around swelling. Her shoulder ached from holding herself against the deck's lean. She had no spare body left, and still the first part of her wanted to use his. That was the shame of command. You found living things that trusted you and spent them carefully. Then called it duty so you could sleep later, if sleep was feeling generous. Another impact hit water behind the pontoon, bright spray over false calm. Mako lunged toward the sound and came up short when Mara locked the lead. The dog checked back, confused and hot, and ready to forgive the order before she had earned it. That nearly did more damage than the bullet. While he looked at her, the weak side movement shifted again, taking the inches his attention had stopped owning. "You get one more ugly walk, then you're off the line," Mara told him. He gave her that sideways Malinois look, half insult, half business. "You picked a hell of a day to become philosophical." The words were dry enough to stand. They did not soften the choice. She sent him 2 steps farther, just enough for his presence to hold the weak side movement, while Briggs slid free with Hattie's help and a sound he tried not to make. Then she pulled Mako back. All the way. No negotiation. He fought the lead for 1 hot second, not against her, against being useful and told to stop. Mara caught his collar with her bad hand and paid for it in white pain. "Off," she said. "That's an order." She passed him back behind the safer line, near a stack of low cargo, where a soldier with frightened eyes understood the look she gave him and took the lead with both hands. The weak side opened in her mind like a missing tooth. It opened in the real world, too. Hattie had to throw his shoulder against a door to block a driver from bolting. Cho snapped a command that froze the next truck half crooked. Briggs tried to stand and nearly folded. Mara stepped into the gap Mako had left, wrist useless, lungs hot, boots sliding on salt. Without the dog's pressure, the weak side had to be held by shoulders, doors, and ugly nerve. A soldier tried to fill too much space and got shoved back into the flatbed with a grunt that made Hattie swear. Mako was alive. The defense was poorer. The final crossing would have to happen with humans filling the gap the dog had bought and then lost. Across the approach, the enemy movement gathered again, closer now, patient as a bill collector. The last vehicle looked harmless, which was its first lie. It was smaller than the tanker, lighter than the cargo flatbed, and already half empty from men who had abandoned gear when fear finally became practical. The drivers behind it saw that and breathed like fools. One man even let his shoulders drop. Another wiped his mouth and looked toward the far road instead of the bridge under his tires. "Almost done" was a dangerous phrase. It made hands loose and eyes lazy. Mara watched the vehicle's front wheels instead of its size. One wheel answered late. The steering had been struck or bent or scared into bad behavior. She did not need the biography. The rear load sat wrong too, high on one side where tool cases and water cans had been thrown back in after the rescue. Light did not mean safe. Light meant the bridge had less weight to trust and more rhythm to resent. Mako stood behind the cargo stack with another soldier on the lead, breathing hard, furious at being alive and unemployed. He could not be spent here. Mara felt that absence at the weak side like cold air through a broken door. Her wrist had gone stiff enough that every gesture required a little lie. "Cho," she said. "Final count." The radio hissed. Cho answered with no decoration. One last vehicle, 2 walking wounded on Convoy side, terminal group moving, exposure rising. "Hattie," Mara said. Truth, not comfort. Hattie was kneeling by Nabil, one hand dark with somebody else's blood and grease. He looked at the last vehicle the way a man looked at a cousin who had disappointed him before. "Driver is Sammy," he said. "Good hands when calm, he is not calm." Of course. Why would the bridge offer her a calm driver now, when Comedy was apparently dead, but Spite had excellent stamina? Load. Tools on the right. Water cans left rear. One crate still tied high. Two men climbed in after Layla moved them. They should not have. Layla cut into the channel from the terminal side, breath chopped by movement. The pump house workers were across the marked wall. The old man was on his feet and cursing everyone's ancestors, which Mara accepted as a positive medical sign without making it a medical issue. One worker remained at the edge with a bad ankle and two people helping him. They were moving, but not fast. Not enough. Cho gave the next status before Mara asked. If the last vehicle did not start now, the convoy stack would lose spacing again, and the terminal group would be caught in the open. Valid. Ugly. Familiar. Mara looked at the water. It looked calm again. She no longer believed it out of politeness. Rafe moved before giving the option, which was how Mara knew she was going to dislike it. He stepped closer to the exposed equipment edge, low and careful, watching the underside of the span with his whole body. The enemy had been quiet for too long in the way a room went quiet before a bad answer. I can call the water from here, Rafe said. Not from back there. Define here, where you're already angry. He was right. He needed the angle under the float, the one Mara could not see from deck, and the one the weak side pressure had started to own. Useful, not magic. Expensive, naturally. You move when I tell you, she said. You breathe when I approve it. Still warm and generous. Still not dead. Don't get ambitious. Sammy's light utility vehicle rolled, and immediately the deck gave a dry shiver through the plates. The front end twitched left before the rear found the lane. The high-tide crate leaned with a soft knocks that sounded small until the rail trembled under it. Sammy overcorrected. Mara could see it in his shoulders through the dusty rear glass. Every instinct in him wanted to fight the wheel. Every instinct in the bridge wanted to punish him for that. Talk him down, she told Hattie. Use his name. Hattie did, loud and steady, and Sammy heard enough to stop rattling the whole world. Sammy's light utility vehicle crawled forward in a rhythm nobody loved, but everyone survived for the next 3 seconds. Layla confirmed the last worker had cleared the edge. Cho confirmed the convoy gap was ugly but usable. Rafe called the water late, then later, then now, his voice thin. Because he had stepped too far into the open to see what the bridge was hiding. Mara gave the roll. Not a push. A permission with teeth. The vehicle moved, light and crooked and full of bad little truths. Mako whined once from behind the cargo stack, not a solution, just the sound of a living tool refusing retirement. Mara did not look at him. If she looked, she would want him. If she wanted him, she might use him. The bridge shivered under the final vehicle, and for one bitter second people believed almost done again. A driver behind Mara laughed once, too early, the sound thin enough to break. Then movement broke at the weak side, lower and closer than before. A shape came through the vehicle line. Another behind it. Rafe was exposed at the waterline. Sammy's vehicle was halfway committed and moving wrong. The enemy had waited for the moment when relief made everyone stupid. The final assault began exactly there. The final assault arrived with Sammy's vehicle still halfway committed, which was exactly the kind of timing. That made Mara believe the enemy had learned the bridge better than some of her own drivers. A shape came through the vehicle line at the weak side. Another followed low behind it. Impacts cracked against metal and water and the far edge, not loud enough to be dramatic. Just precise enough to make the deck flinch through every boot on it. Sammy's vehicle jerked left. The high-tide crate knocked once, shifted, and the rear wheels answered with a stutter the lane could barely carry. "Rafe," Mara said, and her voice came out flatter than her pulse. "Water." He was too exposed by the equipment edge, one knee bent, one hand on the rail, face turned toward the underside of the span. "Now is ugly," he said. "Late gets uglier." Cho cut in at once. Last vehicle half across, convoy side clear enough to receive. Terminal group moving but not safe until Layla confirmed the bad ankle worker was through. "Hattie," shouted Sammy's name, like he could nail the man's hands to the wheel with sound. Mako whined behind the cargo stack, alive and furious and out of the line. Mara heard him and did not turn. Turning would spend time and maybe mercy, and both were short. Mara took the inputs one by one because taking them all at once would have made noise instead of a decision. Rafe had the water. Cho had the vehicles. Hattie had the driver and the names. Layla had the workers. Mako had only his heat and his limit, which still mattered, because the weak side was open without him. And no amount of wishing put teeth back where she had chosen not to spend them. Her wrist throbbed in the glove. Her shoulder had gone wooden. The bridge rolled under Sammy's front wheels, then tried to come back and stopped short, as if the current below had caught it by the ribs. "Leela," Mara said. "Human status." Static, breath, machinery, then Layla's voice, "Last worker through the mark. Bad ankle moving, not clear of blast cover yet." The words came over the radio, while Mara watched two figures stumble behind the terminal barrier, one dragging the other by the belt. "Not enough." "Cho, convoy can receive one more length. After that we lose spacing." "Not enough." Rafe swore, sharp and small. "Current's walking harder. If you hold for pride, you lose the road." Mara looked at the fuel slick shine and did not trust it. She looked at Sammy's shoulders and did not trust fear either. So she trusted the loop. "Hold him straight," she told Hattie. "Cho, freeze the stack. Layla, move bodies now, not cleanly. Rafe, call me the last breath." Nobody asked what that meant. Good. Questions were expensive. The enemy push hit the weak side in that same breath. Men came through shadow and vehicle heat, and the team met them with bodies. Shouted warnings, slammed doors, moving steel, ugly close pressure, every safe detail stripped away by speed. A driver threw his shoulder into a door and kept it there while metal snapped around him. Hattie dragged Sammy's attention back with his name. Again and again, each shout timed to the wheel's ugly twitch. Cho locked the convoy with a voice so cold it seemed to hold the air still. Briggs, gray-faced and still hurting, kept his good hand on the strap and yelled when the flatbed tried to swing. Mako barked from behind the cargo, not solving anything, just marking the place where the gap used to be smaller. Rafe leaned too far to see the water's answer. The next impact cut sparks from the rail near him. He went down hard on one hip, caught himself, and still shouted, "Now, last clean now." Mara's grip failed on the first signal and caught on the second. Pain climbed her arm. She gave the call anyway. Sammy rolled. The bridge dipped, groaned, and let the vehicle crawl the last ugly length across. Then it was done, and not done at all. The last vehicle cleared the receiving edge with a rear wheel that scraped metal like a bad confession. Layla confirmed bodies clear, her voice wrecked by running and smoke and whatever she had swallowed to keep moving. Hattie confirmed names, not numbers. Cho confirmed the convoy side had them, though her voice had no victory in it. Rafe did not stand. He was breathing, which was the kind of success that asked for no applause. Blood slid from his sleeve into diesel water and vanished too quickly. The bridge kept moving after it had given them the crossing, rolling sideways with a patience that felt almost personal. Mara looked once at the route, at the water pulling under it, at the exposed edge. At Mako dragging breath behind the cargo stack, at Briggs still trying to look useful while pain made him old. She made the final denial call at the level the moment allowed. Not technique, not ceremony, just ending the road before the enemy could make it theirs. The equipment side hands had been waiting for that ugly order. They moved at once, small bodies against a large machine, and the damaged section quit pretending to be a road. A line came free under load with a sound like wet rope tearing. One float slewed out of alignment. The near edge dropped just enough to turn passage into water and metal argument. The route was lost in noise, spray, rail tremor, and a hard shudder that went through the deck and into Mara's bones. Something heavy gave way out on the span. The rail line dipped. The fuel sheen broke into torn pieces and slid apart. No one cheered. Afterward came a damaged silence full of counting. Hattie counted names under his breath. Layla answered each one from the far side until her voice cracked. Cho said the convoy was moving, then stopped as if the word saved felt too clean. Critical people were alive. The bridge was gone as an answer. Rafe bled onto diesel-wet metal. Briggs cursed softly. Mako leaned against Mara's leg when she reached him, heat trembling through his ribs. "Nobody reads a bridge alone," she said, barely loud enough for the living. It was not a lesson. It was the bill.